Greetings, YouTube. So, I have an update. This is part two of the video that I posted earlier today called Descendants of Slaves, Sex Lives, and Hair Salons. So, I just want to give you some background on like the very mysterious history of our family. Not because our family is so fantastic in comparison to other families, but we do have an interesting storyline, several storylines that have merged. You know, the past and the present and our potential future are coming together in different ways. And we're all very observant, and we see this playing out, and we know how important it is to know where we came from and who our people are and who our people were. Also, what we're going through as a family is what so many other descent, African American Black descendants of slave families are going through, and it's always been my contention and the contention of my sister, which you will see more of on future videos. You'll actually see her on future videos. Um, that a lot of the enmity that exists in the Black community, of course, stems from economic reasons, financial distress, post-slavery trauma, all of those things. But I also think it's because of the lack of connection that individual families have to their past. Think about how many people in your circle travel within the country, within the city, from job to job just to make it. I know probably 8 friends right now who have had to uproot themselves from their city to go move to another city and another state in order to maintain employment, because we're not allowed to set down roots anymore in our jobs. Right now, I think unless you're self-employed, government positions, federal, state, and local, are probably the one of the last positions uh, where an employee can almost be guaranteed that they will have. Oh, excuse me, somebody's trying to call me. Um, Employees will be guaranteed to have employment for life, right? You can start, stay there a good 20, 25 years, collect your pension, move on. So you can sit down, you can start a family, you can get married, you can buy a home. Your children can go to the same school. You can create other connections within the community. All of those things are important. And you have that not only do you have that shared community history, but you have that shared familial history, because if you set down roots in your community, your family members and those who are extended out from them can also set down roots. Because let's face it, how many of us have people in our family or close friends who have needed to crash on our couch, or who needed help, or who just needed connections to employment? So if you're stable, the people who are around you can be stable, right? And I'm not going to go into that here. You can go tune into any previous Yvette Carnell or Tone Talks episode to that, because I love them. I follow both of them, and they're excellent. And you can just follow any one of those episodes to get a good background on what creates good, healthy, strong communities. So we have all of this enmity going on, between the genders, within subgroups of our demographic, and it's never going to get any better. I'm convinced that uh, unless there is some type of extreme correction, that we are pretty much just going to breed ourselves out of existence in about 500 to 1,000 years. And not all Black people, just the ones who were born here in the States. So, what what I've been really interested in trying to piece together what happened to my family has has what will provide answers on several levels. Let me get my little notebook out. It will provide answers on several levels. It will provide answers about what womanhood is. It will provide answers on what Black womanhood is, manhood, Black manhood, what families mean. and just what the so-called good old days really were, the more I talk to people, the more I talk to the elders in my family and the elders in other families, the more I realize that we have romanticized this whole idea of the good old days and how people used to behave in their relationships. It was just survival. People were surviving, and whatever we did or didn't do prior to the last 20 years, we did as a reaction to the opportunities that were available to us. And I'm not just talking about descendants of slaves, I'm talking about everyone. So I'm going back in time to our family and and when I go back, I don't just ask, okay, who were you married to? What was my grandfather's name? What was his brother's name? I don't just ask those questions. I ask, what did they do for a living? How did he meet his wife? Did she have children before she met him? Why did she have children? Oh, I see you have over here, a sister who died at the age of 95, and I don't see any husbands or children attached to this sister. What was that about? Because birth control was not very plentiful during her earlier years. So why did she not? Why are there no children there attached to her? And when you start talking to people, you get interesting information based on no, the more detailed the answer is directly correlated to whether or not the people who are in that story are still alive. That's what I've noticed. So in the previous video, you heard me talk to my sister about a conversation I had with my Aunt Perlene. My Aunt Perlene is actually my great great aunt. She was my grandmother's aunt, my mother's great aunt, our great great aunt. She died at the age of 103, 2 weeks before my mom passed away in 2011. And when she was in her coherent years, I remember coming home from college and being really interested in the history of our family because I was taking history classes, I was taking African American studies classes and classes about cultures, and I really wanted to know about ours. All of a sudden, I just had this hunger to understand where I came from. At the time, my Aunt Perlene lived with my grandmother and my grandfather by um, by marriage. Okay, so I hold that thought. Let me hold that thought too, because I will forget. So I remember going straight to my grandmother first and saying, "Hey, Grandma, can you tell us about Leon Robinson?" Leon was my mom's birth father. We never met him, but random people in the street would come up to me and say, "Wow, you look like Leon." I would hear that all throughout my childhood, and I would be like, "Well, who is Leon?" And I would go home and ask my mom. My mom would get really quiet, and she would say, "That's my dad." She said, "He didn't raise me." She said, "Your granddaddy raised me." Our granddaddy was Charles Williams. That's so we never thought of him as a step granddaddy. He never treated us any differently than he would his own blood grandchild. We just thought, oh, this is granddaddy, and that's how it was. And so my mom didn't want to talk about it, so we didn't talk about it. But now I need to know. This is a whole side of our family here, and I look like him, coloring, cheeks, fat jaws, everything. I look like this man. I want to know who he is. So, um, I learned how to be crafty and how I communicated with people. Going away to college and coming back home, you begin to kind of take a step back and observe the people in your family and how they interact. And you realize that there are certain dysfunctions that surround our communication with each other that you begin to learn and practice until you leave and come back. And when you come back, especially as a college student, you come back really irreverent and I don't give a damn. I want to, you have that kind of cockiness Now, I knew not to do that because I always had respect for my elders, but I was a little more insistent. So I pinpointed that I could get information that I needed from my great aunt Pearline, and I began to spend more time with her. I would go sit in the room where she sat watching TV, and I'd ask her questions about her childhood and the flood of 1927, and her, I asked her to show me pictures of her and her husband, just all kinds of stuff. And in some kind of way, I would maneuver like, oh, is that Leon? Yeah, knowing good and well, this is Leon's not in this picture. I said, that Leon, he looks like mommy. And she would be like, she'd turn around and say, close the door. And I would get up, close the door, and we'd sit and start talking. But she had a very odd way of speaking. She would always kind of meander and, talk about flowers and then pictures and how she was a secretary, and then she was an operator at this company, and how she didn't let a man control her. Then she met her husband, and she fell in love, and oh, so many things. And I would have to kind of gently kind of pull her back. Okay, Aunt Perlene, so what's going on with my grandfather? So it took probably, I would say, no less than 50 conversations to figure out that Leon was not somebody we could talk about openly. It brought too much pain to my grandmother, or whether she feigned pain, I don't know yet. Something happened that was either painful and or embarrassing and or shameful, so much so that to this day no one will talk about it. All we know is that Leon Robinson was married, we're assuming. I can't get that information from anybody. Was married to my grandmother, had two children, my mom and one of my uncles. And then he had an argument with my grandmother. He went to Detroit. I believe he wanted her to go to Detroit with him, but my Aunt Perline, who raised my grandmother the second half of her life, or of her young life, said, you can't leave your children, you have to stay. In some kind of way, she stayed. Leon left and never came back to get his wife, my grandmother. My grandmother met my grandfather, the only grandfather that I've ever known, Charles Williams, and they got married and had another son, Charles Williams Jr., Buddy, Uncle Buddy. So, and nobody will talk about Leon. That's all she will say. And it took 50 conversations to get that much out, because every time my grandmother realized that I was in the room by myself with Aunt Perline, she would literally burst open the door. She'd open the door, open the door. Sometimes I would lock it and sometimes I wouldn't. She'd bust open through the door and, what are you all doing? What are you talking about? What's going on? And she always had this kind of defensive, slightly hostile tone whenever she did that, which let me know she must have known what we were talking about. She was probably eavesdropping at the door, listening to us trying to have this conversation. And so one of those times when she did this, oh, I got a Marco. One of these times when she did this, I said, well, Grandma, I'm just asking her some questions about my grandfather. And then to cover for my aunt, I would say, but she hasn't told me anything. But it would be nice to know. Is there anything you could tell me? This was the last conversation we had. It hurt my feelings, and the last conversation we had about my grandfather, and it hurt my feelings because she was so she was so just hostile. She said, stop asking about that man. Just stop asking. You have a grandfather, and he raised your mother, and he helped raise you along with you and everybody else in his family, and he's a good man, and that's it. And my Aunt Perline just sat back and just started watching television, and that was it. I couldn't get anybody to say anything for years. For years. That's it. And all I could do, was just say, okay, I guess I'm going to have to figure out something else. Now, in the meanwhile, I remember having these conversations with random strangers in the street who would say, wow, you look like Leon. Oh, are you Beverly's child? And they would say, hey, I'm your cousin. And as a child, I just didn't pay attention to that because our family kept us so isolated. And that's another thing that my sister Simone and I talked about on the videotape, was the isolation that we experienced caused by our grandmother, where we just kind of sat. We only interacted with each other and our immediate uncles and aunts. We couldn't go to any family reunions on either side of the family. We couldn't go. We just and they trained us not to care about anybody else. So when cousins came up to me in the street saying, "Hey, I'm your cousin," and they looked like me, coloring, we had these distinctive cheeks and everything and eyes, and they looked like me. And I said, oh, okay. But I was trained not to give a damn. So I was like, oh, hey. And I would keep walking, and I could just slap myself because now I want to go find these people and ask them. So you're a Robinson. So where on the line of Robinsons are you? Like, are you my mom's cousin, sister, brother? Who are these people? And we do know that Leon went to Detroit. He went to Detroit, got married again, had a whole new family, had about 6, 7, 8, 11 children, and you know that's it. That's all we know. When I turned 15, I remember walking into the kitchen one day, and my grandmother was quiet, my mother was crying, and I looked, and what was in her hand, it was an obituary that my grandmother had. And somebody must have brought the obituary by, and it said that Leon Robinson had passed away. And I cannot remember for the life of me if my mom, no, she wasn't. My mom was not listed in the obituary, and that's why she was crying. She wasn't listed at all. There was no mention of his life in Greenville, and there was no mention of my mom's brother. And again, being the inquisitive teenager that I was like, okay, so was he buried here? Why weren't we invited to the funeral? And again, they were like, leave the room. This is not for you to listen to or to worry about. See more secrets, more things. And even when I could pull my mom to the side later on in life, she wouldn't talk about it. Everybody was protecting something, and I think they were protecting my grandmother, who now has Alzheimer's. She's 95. So they were all protecting her, and everybody was um, just pretending as if life that person didn't matter, but it does matter, and I'll tell you why in the next video.